Picture the scene. You're out on a Sunday afternoon. The sun is shining, but it's not too hot. It's not too harsh. You're having a lovely time with the family or your mates. Maybe you've popped by a pub or two, grab some lunch somewhere, and then you come downhill and you go to brake and this happens. What a lovely noise to upset the tranquility of your Sunday afternoon. Okay, I'm going to talk you through 5 different ways that hopefully can eliminate this awful squeal. So let's get to it. So firstly, a quick science lesson for you. That noise you're hearing is actually a vibration which turns into a form of resonance. The frequency itself creating sound. Much like when you rub a wet finger around the rim of a wine glass, that resonance can create sound. That is exactly what's happening here. So we need to eliminate that. And the first thing we can do is to look at the alignment of the brake discs themselves. Because if they're not completely true and they're buckled slightly, then that means they're not going to be braking equally and evenly between the brake pads through every rotation. So if it's slightly a bit off here and there, rubbing left and right like that, then that is going to, at speed, create that resonance. Now in this case, it's nice and straight, but should you need to do that, you can either get yourself a disc truing tool, because discs themselves are actually susceptible to being bent out of true, which means they can be bent back into true as well, and you can bend them back and forth. If you haven't got a truing tool to hand, you could actually use a type of plumber's wrench here and just get things to the right thickness and move back and forth that way as well. So that's number 1. Make sure your discs are truly aligned. On the subject of alignment as well then, you could also make sure that your brake calipers are in alignment too. The way we do that is by loosening the bolts holding the calipers to the caliper frames. You'll see here that there are another 2 bolts as well. These are the ones that hold the caliper frame to the forks. So make sure you're loosening the right bolts. You'll know they're loosened enough because you'll be able to move the calipers by hand. And now off camera, what you do is you squeeze the brake lever, which in turn will push the brake pads to the disc. And hopefully you can see that movement. I'm going to keep the brake lever depressed now. So holding the brake lever, we then do these bolts back up to the correct torque. And once that's done, we can release the brake lever and see if that fixes the issue. So if alignment is the issue, then we have now eliminated that problem too. Let's see. No, the noise is still there. So I think we're talking about contamination in this respect, but hopefully it has solved the issue for you. So now we've narrowed it down perhaps to contamination, we really only have 2 areas we need to focus on, the discs or the actual brake pads. Honestly, if the discs are contaminated with grease and oil, the things that will cause this sort of noise, then the pads are going to be contaminated as well. But there's no point cleaning the pads until you clean the disc. Otherwise, all that hard work cleaning the pads will be pointless because the dirty discs will just contaminate the pads again. So the first thing we do is to give these discs a good clean. And the best thing to use is either a brake cleaner, a disc brake cleaner specially made for bikes, or an isopropyl alcohol mix with water, which I like to use. Now, this stuff you can use quite liberally. It can spray all over the place and it really doesn't matter. It eats up hydraulic fluid, it eats up gunk, and most beautifully, it evaporates. Now, as we're going around with a clean towel, there's no point using a mucky one, you can see how much gunk is coming off in just a space of a few centimeters. Look at that, it's gross. So I think we've got to the bottom of a main issue already. Oh my gosh, that is disgusting. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep working around. Again, if you don't have isopropyl alcohol, but you do have a detergent to hand even, all these sorts of things can remove the contamination. But you need to remember, a lot of these products will leave a residue behind, which you don't want, because the residue themselves can be like an oil-based product as well. And if they're oily, hey, you're just going to have the same problem. It might be clean oil, but it's still oil. Whereas isopropyl alcohol just eats that stuff up and then evaporates. So I'm going to have to be quite liberal with this. So I'm going to stop the video rather than bore you to tears, and I'm going to give this a really good clean, both sides. And then what we're not going to do afterwards is touch it with our fingers, because guess what? Oily fingers can cause the problem too. Okay, so we've given these a good clean, and with a fresh new microfiber cloth, I'm going to run around here and look at that. Nice and clean, no muck going onto the cloth. So we know we're good in that respect, but we're not going to stop there. You might as well clean the pads now as well, because if you've got dirty pads, you're just going to make the disc dirty again. So before you do any breaking, let's get these pads cleaned as well, and I'm going to show you how. You remember a moment ago I showed you how to loosen the 2 caliper bolts? Well, actually we're going to take the bolts out completely this time. You can in theory remove the pads this way by just removing the retaining pin, which we are also going to do in a moment, and pulling the pads out this way. But there's not a lot of room for movement when you've got the discs involved as well. Now of course you could remove the wheel, but actually I think it's a good idea to remove the caliper anyway, because it means we can give the whole thing a good clean. Sometimes the bolts are different lengths, top and bottom, so make sure you keep the right ones to the corresponding end. Make a note of which is which. Sometimes the retainer pins are a screw-in variety. This one just needs to have the ends bent down, and then it should pop out relatively easy. There we go. And then it's just a case of sliding the pads out like that, and then we can get them onto the workshop table. Okay, the pads here are really pretty grim, and so although this is relatively dirty, this sandpaper, it will still do the job. So this is a 180 grit. You can actually go up to mid 300s or 400s. It doesn't really make a big difference. What you're doing is you're getting rid of the top surface of the brake pads here, where they sometimes get glazed if you're braking really sharply, maybe going downhill in an event. But actually over time, the gunk will just go on here as well. So I'm going to remove the gunk. And although we're kind of sanding into muck here, you really don't need to go through lots of different pieces of sandpaper. It's all coming off. You can see the powder here. This isn't good stuff to breathe in, so stay away from it if you can. And you can see a difference between the two surfaces already. This is looking more like new. All that gunk that was on there, you see how glazed and shiny it is in the reflection? It's no longer shiny anymore and glazed. So this actually could solve the problem altogether. Once you've done it to both pads, get yourself a cloth and just wipe the end, and that will just get any surface residual gunk off the surface as well. You can also use your isopropyl alcohol if you wish and get them a bit of a clean as well. Either way, that's not going to damage the pads, but you can whip them back into the caliper and see if that's fixed the issue. So one other thing you could do is boil off whatever is stuck on the pads. Pads, unfortunately, have a terrible side effect, which is they are sponges for contaminants. Whether it's oil, grease, road salt, WD-40, even hydraulic mineral oil, would you believe, the stuff that actually pushes these things back in and out, they are awful for brake pads, and they will all soak in and be stuck inside the pads, and that is what will cause the squeaking. So what you can do, if you haven't been able to scrape it off using the sandpaper, you can actually boil it off. By holding it from a distance, get yourself a blowtorch, and you can actually boil off the contaminants. Eventually they will rise to the surface, and you will literally see them bubbling on the surface. You can even do it over the hob at home if you have a gas hob with a flame. But for me, my personal view is, if things have got that bad, it's probably time for new pads, in all honesty. Now these ones have got a lot of life left in them, so I really hope that the stuff hasn't sunken in, because I'd quite like to buy a new pair just yet. Anyway, I'm going to chuck these back in after sandpaper in them, and I'm going to see if that has fixed the issue. Before you put your pads in, give the calipers themselves a good squirt and just remove any gunk that is pretty obvious. It's okay to use a relatively mucky cloth for this part, because then we can go over it again with a cleaner cloth. There's no point putting a clean cloth on it while it's still mucky, because you'll just ruin your clean cloth. So the clean cloth shouldn't really show much in the way of dirt and residue on it, which would mean that you've done your job properly. And then we can pop the pads back in. Remember not to touch the actual surface of the pads with your greasy fingers. Pop the retainer pin back in. And then we slide the caliper back on, making sure the pads go either side of the disc. Remember to get your bolts the right way around in case top and bottom were different lengths. And do you remember before when we were braking and aligning the calipers that way? We're going to do exactly the same again. So braking, there we go. Okay, again, you need to do these up to proper torque. But let's see if that noise has gone. Look at that, silent as you like. Well, certainly in this case then, that problem is solved and we are now squeak and squeal free. So it looks like the sandpapering in particular, as well as cleaning the discs, has solved the problem for us. But again, for you, it might be you need to boil off the contaminants that are on your pads, or indeed, maybe it's time for new pads as well. But those are 4 different ways. The 5th way, I secretly quite like. This is when you're out on the trails and you are wanting to get rid of that horrible squeal that has happened while you've been out. You can actually get yourself a handful of soil, earth, something that you're going to find on your trails, like that. Put it into the cup of your hand. And I can't believe I'm doing this because I'm now going to have to clean the discs again. But you can use, by cupping your hand, you can actually run the disc through the soil. I've got an awful lot of cleaning to do. I should have done this outside. And would you believe this soil, actually, the earth just absorbs a lot of the contaminants that would have been on your disc. So it makes the disc quite grubby. Wet soil works even better. And then what happens is, go for a good ride downhill, brake hard, and the pads will absorb all of that stuff and it will essentially eat up any of the surface contaminants. Much like when you have a diesel spill out on the road, often people will put sand or soil over the diesel spill to remove that slippiness, the grease, because it absorbs it. That's exactly what we've just done here with the earth. So again, that will get rid of your squeakiness. So that's your 5th tried and tested method. But folks, I really hope this has been a helpful video for you. In conclusion, the noise is caused by vibration, which then causes resonance, which causes frequency, which causes the noise. So the noise is because things are not making proper contact. So the first thing you want to do is sort out your alignment of your disc, then sort out the alignment of your calipers, eliminate that issue. After that, it means there's going to be contamination if you still have the squealing going on. Clean your discs properly and then clean your pads properly. Hopefully, by using the sandpaper trick like I did, it will solve the problem like it did for me as well. If not, you can boil things off. If you're out on the road, you can use your wet soil, your earth, to remove that issue as well. But there we go, 5 top tips, and we are now squeak free. So we are job done. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, please subscribe. It then makes it all worthwhile for me, and I should look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.